The first wheelbarrow of dry leaves was still warm from the autumn sun when George Calloway stopped on the road. John Latham kept working, hands buried to the wrists in crackling gold.
You stuffing your walls with dead leaves, John? What's next? A thatch roof of old hay.
Still air trapped in bone-dry leaves, doesn't care what George thinks.
John didn't look up. His leather gloves rasped against the leaves. He packed another handful tight.
John, is he gone? I heard his voice from the kitchen.
Just passing through, Mary. Same as always, free advice.
The town will have us painted as simpletons before the first snow.
When it's 40 below, these leaves will be worth more than all the mockery in the valley.
Within a week, the name was everywhere the Leaf House. It traveled from the general store to the church, a quiet joke that grew louder each day.
Good. Let them call it whatever they want. The walls will teach them soon enough.
That evening, John took Mary to the half-packed wall. His voice was low, as if the leaves themselves were listening.
Still air traps thousands of tiny pockets. Bone-dry leaves stop cold because nothing moves.
If they get damp, one spark and we're a tinderbox.
Bone-dry, Mary. Feel it. I raked them after a week of sun. They'll never rot or burn.
What about mice? They'll nest in here and ruin everything.
Sealed tight with clay. No gaps. Nothing gets in. Not even the cold.
The next morning, Mary held the cart while John filled it. The silence was easier now. At the store, John overheard the new name. The Leaf House muttered loud enough for all.
Leaf House. I'll wear it like a badge until winter proves it means something else.
By the week's end, the first wall was packed solid. 3 to go, and the coldest winter still weeks away. 3 more walls went up the same way. Leaves tamped until the timbers groaned. The first snow flurries swirled as John tapped in the last peg.
John, the wall isn't cold. It feels like the hearth is on the other side.
John ran his hand along every seam, from the floor joists to the rafters. The candle flame didn't flicker once.
No drafts. The still air is doing its work. We'll burn half the wood we did last year.
The next morning, Mary walked to the store alone. 3 women fell silent when she passed.
Leaf House. They say it like a curse. Even the shopkeeper wouldn't meet my eye. They called us leaf people today, John. I couldn't even buy flour without the staring.
Staring doesn't freeze. And their tongues, they're just burning wood, will save.
That night, a second cold snap bit deep. Inside, the fire burned low and the air held warm. Mary said no more about the town.
The walls are holding. Not just leaves, the forest's own coat. Winter hasn't met it yet.
The cold snap hardened overnight. Hoarfrost climbed the window panes, but inside the Leaf House, the fire burned low and the walls stayed warm.
Only 2 logs since midnight. The woodpile is barely touched.
John pressed his palm to the leaf-packed wall. Not a single cold spot. The still air held like a silent promise.
Sleeping warm in a compost heap, Latham. Your house must smell like a swamp.
Step inside, George. The air's so still, you can smell the difference if your nose works.
George stepped closer, peering at the wall's edge. A few dry leaves poked from a seam near the corner.
Fire trap. 1 spark and your precious leaves go up like a hay barn. You've built a pyre, not a house.
Why won't he leave us alone? The walls work. I felt it, but now the whole town will hear fire trap next.
Let him shout. His lungs are burning wood, we'll save. He'll remember this when his pile runs thin.
The cold snap broke by noon, but the walls held their warmth. Mary couldn't shake the sting of the words. Even as the woodpile towered, a week of steady cold settled over the valley. The woodpile shrank, but John's lost only a single cord.
John, we've burned less than half of what we used by this time last year. The leaves are paying their keep.
John walked the walls each evening, where the leaves had settled. He pressed in fresh handfuls, tamping until the timber creaked.
The leaves compact over time. A little top-up keeps the density. Still, air doesn't forgive gaps.
At the Calloway place, the axe rang late into the dusk. George's woodpile was already a third gone, and the deep cold hadn't come.
I can walk through town now and not flinch when they whisper. The walls are proof enough for me.
She carried her chin higher, even when the storekeeper still refused to meet her eye.
The colder it gets, the louder the silence in these walls. The leaves don't lie.
But the valley watched two piles. John's still standing tall, and George's dwindling faster than anyone dared admit. Winter hadn't shown its teeth yet, but the balance was already shifting. 3 nights later, the temperature fell 10 degrees harder. Inside the Leaf House, the fire crackled low, and the walls held steady. John ran his hand along the corner seam and froze. A feather of cold air slipped past his fingers.
There, a breath of cold. The leaves settled and left a gap no wider than a blade.
I'll get the canvas strips. We'll stop it before it turns into a leak.
Mary pressed the canvas into the seam, while John packed fresh leaves behind it. The draft vanished. At the Calloway place, the wind found every gap. George's wife huddled by the stove, her wool blanket pulled tight.
Woman, you are shivering louder than a rusty pump. Tomorrow I'll chink the logs again. The walls are thicker than the Latham leaf pile, and still the draft cuts through.
I'll sew extra canvas padding for the doorframe. Just to be sure, no cold finds another path.
While the Lathams slept without a draft, George Calloway spent the night listening to his wife cough and the wind whistle through the logs. 2 days later, the town gathered in the snowy square. A meeting was called over the firewood crisis, and George Calloway took the center.
Early cold caught us off guard. Some planned poorly. We must ration, not waste time on foolish experiments.
John stood at the back, hands in his pockets. The words Leaf House never left George's mouth, but they hung in the air.
Why won't he speak? One sentence could silence them all.
On the walk home, Mary pulled him aside. Her voice shook.
They're freezing, John. Our woodpile rots while they burn their last sticks, and you stand silent.
Words don't warm a house. When they're ready to listen, they'll see the proof.
And if they freeze first, will your silence keep them from the cold?
They'll come knocking soon enough. The cold doesn't argue.
That night, John's woodpile stood untouched in the moonlight, a silent answer to the valley's dwindling stacks. By dawn, a neighbor appeared at the door, voice tight with shame, asking to borrow a cord.
Take 2 logs. It'll warm you tonight, but guard them. The deep freeze hasn't come.
The pile's half what it was. We can't feed the whole valley. John, there's a smell here, like damp earth. Something's not right.
John pressed his palm to the timber. A thin film of moisture clung to his skin, cold and out of place.
Condensation. The warm room meets the cold wall and sweats. Leaves aren't damaged, just needs a vent.
He cut a narrow slot near the ceiling with his knife. A whisper of air passed through, taking the dampness with it.
Won't that let the cold pour in?
Cold doesn't climb, Mary. The warm pocket stays below. This just gives the wet air an escape.
Across the valley, George Calloway's woodpile was nearly gone, but his pride held faster than the frost. The blizzard warning rolled through the valley like a cold fist. Neighbors hauled in wood and boarded windows.
1 more bucket of clay for the foundation, then we're sealed tight.
The wind will hammer us. What if the leaves settle and leave a gap?
They won't. Still air is still air, no matter the wind.
George split his last logs and sent away neighbors, offering dried leaves. Pride burned hotter than any wood.
I'll need no leaf pile. My walls are twice as thick as Latham's compost.
John pressed clay into every seam, until his fingers numbed. Mary held the bucket in the fading light.
The clay seals the outer shell. Inside, the leaves won't shift. Double wall, double guard.
By dusk, the first heavy flakes fell. The wind began to howl across the ridge. John watched the snow swirl beyond the window. The walls stayed silent. The test was coming. The blizzard struck at midnight. The first gust slammed the ridge with a force that shook the timbers. Inside the Leaf House, Mary laid her knitting aside and listened. The wind screamed, but the walls held fast.
It's like the storm is in another world. I don't feel a single draft.
The still air is a wall within a wall. As long as the roof holds, we'll stay warm.
Across the valley, George Calloway pressed his back against the shivering door.
Every seam leaks. The wind cuts through this place like a sieve.
His wife coughed in the dark. The last embers glowed, but the cold was already winning.
Just a few more hours. The storm will break.
But the blizzard only deepened. Outside, the world turned white. Inside, the leaf-packed walls kept their silence. By dawn, the first true test was written plain. One cabin, a sanctuary. The other, a slow freeze. The wind climbed to a shriek. John cocked his head. A thin whistle threaded through the rafters. He climbed a stool, jammed a rag into the gap, and packed dry leaves behind it.
The high note is gone. You caught every draft that dared come through.
A seam split in the roof. Still air is restored. The storm will find no other cracks.
Outside, the mercury fell past 0. By noon, it touched 20 below, then 30. At the Calloway place, the stove's last ember blackened. George's wife coughed to a hard, raw rattle.
The chimney draws, but the cold burns faster than any fire could fight it. We can't wait for the storm to break. I'll have to do something.
Through the blizzard, the Latham's windows glowed. Inside, Mary poured tea while John fed the fire. The thermometer on the porch railing read -30. The Leaf House was still a different world. By noon, the needle touched 35 below. The air outside seemed to crackle with its own malice. John brought in a single armload of wood. The fire was small, but the walls radiated a steady, dry warmth.
Only 3 logs since the storm began. This house shouldn't feel like midsummer.
Still air holds the heat. Those leaves are worth a forest now.
Across the valley, George's wife couldn't stop shivering. Her cough had gone silent, a deeper, more dangerous sign.
She'll freeze in another hour. The Leaf House is the only place that holds heat. I have to go.
He pulled on every layer he owned, then wrapped his wife in the last dry blanket. The wind screamed at the eaves.
Hold on. I am getting help. Don't you leave me.
The door swung open onto a world of white fury. George Calloway took one breath and plunged into the storm.
500 yards to the Leaf House, the longest I've ever walked.
The mercury touched 40 below. The cold became a physical weight, pressing on the valley like a second darkness. George Calloway crawled through drifts that reached his chest. The light of the Leaf House seemed to recede with every step.
Each breath burns. The light, can't lose sight of it. Just keep moving.
John ran his fingers along the doorframe and found a sliver of cold. He reached for a leather strip. He pressed the leather into the crack until the draft ceased. The still air reclaimed its hold. Mary froze. A faint, irregular thudding came from the porch, more like a body falling than a knock. John crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled the door open. George Calloway sprawled on the porch, snow already burying his legs. His face was a frozen mask. His lips moved, but no sound came. His eyes, though, they held a desperate plea. John looked down at the man who had called his home a pyre. The storm howled, the storm howled. The still air waited.
John, help me pull him in. We can't leave him to freeze.
Fire trap, he called it. Now, the fire trap is the only thing between him and the grave.
John nodded once and grabbed George's other arm. Together, they dragged the stiff, half-frozen man across the threshold. George's skin was ice to the touch, his lips blue as the frozen river. He couldn't speak, only shiver against the wooden floor. Mary wrapped him in every blanket they had. John threw 3 more logs on the fire until the flames leaped up the chimney.
Shh, don't try to talk. Just let the warmth come. Your wife will be next.
Even a Callaway won't die on my floor. The leaves won't let him.
The leaf-packed walls held the heat like a closed fist. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, the air was motionless and warm. The color crept back into George's cheeks, slowly, as if the frost itself was retreating. Mary knelt beside him, watching the rise and fall of his chest. A single tear slipped down her cheek, relief, not joy. George's eyes opened slowly. He blinked at the low, steady firelight, trying to piece together where he was and why he felt warmth instead of ice. His gaze drifted to the wall beside him. There, pressed tight between the timbers, were layers of dry leaves, the very thing he had mocked.
How is this place so warm? We haven't burned a log in hours.
Still air. The leaves trap it. Nothing moves, so the heat stays.
And I called it a fire trap. I was blind, John. The whole town was blind, and I was the loudest fool.
Here, drink this broth. It'll warm the rest of you.
I was wrong, John. Wrong about everything. Can you forgive a stubborn old man?
We'll need to talk about your wife. But first, rest.
The leaves I burned every autumn could have saved her. The forest gives it free, and I never saw.
The storm still screamed outside, but inside, 3 people sat enclosed by walls that held more than just heat.
My wife is still over there, freezing. I have to ask him. The leaves could save her. John, the walls. Could your leaves work in my cabin? It's all that's left between her and the cold.
It's midwinter. Dry leaves aren't easy to come by now.
But John looked at the man who had begged for his life, and his hesitation broke.
I have a store of dry leaves in the shed, kept for repairs. We'll use what we need.
I'll wrap her in these. She won't shiver another night.
Bone-dry leaves, packed tight. Any dampness will rot them. Seal every seam with clay or canvas. The still air does the rest.
Thank you, John. I'll pay back every leaf with interest when spring comes.
Outside, the wind still clawed at the walls, but inside, a pact had been sealed, as tight as the leaf-packed timbers. The promise held, suspended in the still air, until the storm would allow them to move. The blizzard broke at dawn. John and George stepped out into a world of still, blinding white. They loaded a sled with sacks of dry leaves from the shed.
They still crackle like autumn. I can't believe you saved these.
Dry as the day I raked them. Now let's get them into your walls before the next cold sets in.
At George's cabin, they pried off the interior boards. The walls gaped like open wounds, but soon the leaves would fill them.
Pack them tight like this? I've never done such work.
Tighter. Every air pocket stops the wind. Your wife's life depends on no gaps.
Within hours, the last board went back. George lit a fresh fire, and the cabin began to hold its own warmth. George's wife, swaddled in Mary's blankets, stopped shivering for the first time in days.
The leaves I burned every autumn could have kept her warm. Never again.
The proof was in the silence. No drafts, no frost on the walls. The cheapest insulation in the county had saved them. By the next morning, word had spread like frost. Neighbors saw smoke rising from George's chimney and windows clear of ice. They came with questions and empty carts, curiosity overcoming shame. A young farmer asked the question on every tongue. Could leaves really hold back the cold?
Dry leaves, packed tight and sealed. That's all. The air goes still and the cold can't move.
I mocked him, and I was wrong. My wife is alive because of those dead leaves.
Some faces held doubt, but the evidence was blazing in the hearth and glowing in the wall.
We have dry leaves to share, enough for a few walls. Come and learn.
John showed them the method, how to tamp, how to seal, how to test for still air with a candle. Not everyone was convinced, but they left with sacks that crackled like autumn gold.
They'll learn. The forest teaches patience to those who listen.
Within days, George Calloway stood shoulder to shoulder with John, guiding neighbors through the same walls he once mocked.
Tamp it like John says. The still air does the rest. Don't leave a single gap.
The same men who whispered, "Leaf House," now arrived with empty sleds, their mockery frozen under newer snow.
Gather leaves from under the evergreens. The deep snow keeps them dry. Spread them on a tarp near the fire for a day.
On a windless afternoon, the town gathered again in the square. No crisis this time, only a reckoning.
I called John Latham's walls a fire trap. My wife would be dead if he'd listened to me. The leaves saved us all.
Murmurs rose, but no one objected. The evidence lived in warm cabins and full wood piles. An old-timer stepped forward and shook John's hand, the first handshake born of respect, not pity.
Thank you, John. You didn't just save my life. You gave back my home. I'll never burn a leaf again.
No more Leaf House. Now they'll call it what it is, the forest's gift.
By late winter, a dozen cabins wore coats of leaves. The valley's woodpile stood half full. The fuel crisis broke, not from more timber, but from still air trapped in the forest's old cloak. At the Latham table, the fire burned low. The walls held all the heat they needed.
It was there all along. The forest drops a winter's worth of free insulation every fall.
Mary didn't answer. She just looked at the wall, then at him, and the silence held everything.
The cheapest insulation in the county, and it cost nothing but patience.
When spring came, the leaves would fall again. The walls would wait, ready for another winter. Outside, the aurora shimmered. Inside, the still air held the warmth of a forest's gift. The valley had learned. The forest floor was not waste, it was a winter's coat, freely given. John put his arm around Mary, and together they watched the stars wheel over the white valley. A false thaw softened the snow one morning. Mary walked to the edge of their woodlot, where the ground lay bare for the first time in months. Beneath the bare branches, a carpet of old leaves lay pressed into the mud. Each one had fallen free, waiting.
Every autumn, our land drops a winter's worth of free insulation. It was here all along, waiting.
John appeared behind her, his steps silent on the softening earth. He didn't need to speak.
She sees it now. The forest doesn't just give timber, it gives a blanket every year.
They stood together in the long light, not saying a word. The wind stirred the bare branches, but the silence was full.
A woodlot isn't just for fuel. It's a coat for the house, dropped at our feet.
The sun sank low, gilding the snow and the brittle leaves. The valley held its breath, waiting for spring. When the leaves returned, the walls would be ready. The forest had promised, and John would answer. They walked back toward the cabin, hand in hand, the still air following them home. The cabin waited in the golden dusk, smoke curling from the chimney. The same walls that had been called a joke now held the deepest peace. Inside, the leaves held the heat like a memory. Outside, the valley was learning to see the forest differently. What they had burned for generations, the forest floor's dry cloak, was never waste. It was the cheapest warmth, freely given. Spring came slowly. melting the drifts and uncovering a fresh carpet of last year's leaves, ready for the walls again. Smoke rose from a dozen chimneys now, each one warmed by leaves that had been raked instead of burned. No more leaf house mockery. The valley now called it what it truly was, the forest's coat. And every autumn, when the leaves turned gold and fell, the walls would be ready to receive their patient gift. John Latham never boasted. He simply walked his fields, knowing the forest kept its word. The cheapest insulation in the county had been there all along underfoot, waiting for someone to stop burning it, and the still air, silent and invisible, held everything together.